Discover the incredible moment a single mom texted the wrong number and transformed her life forever. Jessica's hands trembled as she typed her frustration into her phone. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, Sarah. Between the diner, cleaning late nights, and trying to raise the kids, I feel like I'm drowning. How am I supposed to chase my dreams?" She pressed send, feeling a small release of tension, but the message didn't reach Sarah. Instead, it landed in the hands of Mark, an up-and-coming entrepreneur whose life felt galaxies away from her own. "Hey, this isn't Sarah, but I'm here if you need to vent," came the response within moments. Intrigued, Jessica hesitated. This was a stranger, yet something about the brevity of his reply spoke to her, a friendly face behind a screen who wasn't tied to her burdens. Still, she hesitated, weighed down by the urgency of her reality. "Who am I to burden someone new with my woes?" she thought, battling against her instincts. Yet, the floodgates opened as she poured out her heart, bearing the struggles of single motherhood, the ache of a marriage broken, and the flicker of an aspiration to design, stifled beneath her daily grind. As conversations unfolded, they unearthed fears in both of them. Jessica learned to trust Mark's encouragement, finding inspiration in his words as he often nudged her toward her artistic aspirations. "You have talent, let us unleash it," he would type vigorously, each word stirring courage within her. But true to her nature, the notion sent her spiraling. She could hardly juggle her current obligations. Was it too bold to dream of a life beyond serving coffee and washing dishes? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The art competition loomed before her like an insurmountable wall. Courage battled with self-doubt as whispers of envy circled among her competitors, catching in her throat. "What right do I have to stand amongst them?" she thought, grappling with an identity forged from sweat and tears. Yet, roaring within her was the notion that she wanted her children to see their mother push against the tide, to witness her challenge limitations, be they societal or self-imposed. But then came the rejection letter, the sharp thrust of a blade into her burgeoning hope. Staring at the paper, she felt everything shatter. "Maybe this is all I'll ever amount to," she mumbled, pain bleeding into her resolve. In this vulnerable moment, she reached out to Mark, her fingers flying over the screen. Yet, his words consistent, supportive were no balm to the open wound. Instead, they sliced deeper, revealing her fragility, both in her journey and his own. Jessica's thoughts raced as she rehearsed a speech meant to reclaim her narrative, a desperate bid to defend her right to be seen. The weight of uncertainty pressed against her chest as the day approached. Would she have the courage to assert her worth, or would she retreat back into the shadows? The stakes had never been higher. Conflicted emotions churned within her, a tumult of longing and suffocating fear. As she gazed out at the stretch of hopeful faces, a single question lingered in the air. Would this moment mark the beginning of her transformation or fade into mere memory, a testament to what could have been? Jessica stood before the mirror, gripping the edge of the sink as if it were a lifeline. Her reflection stared back, a patchwork of determination and doubt. The rejection letter sat crumpled on her kitchen table, a physical reminder of her perceived failures. For a moment, she let the frustration wash over her, but then clenched her fists, each pulse a silent agreement to pursue something greater. "Mommy, are you coming?" her youngest called from the living room, breaking her trance. The mundane responsibilities rushed back in, pulling at her like a riptide. She knew her children relied on her to be resilient, but the thought of their future filled her with an urgency that collided with her own fears. "What example am I setting if I don't even try?" she whispered to herself, drawing strength from the very voices that could drown her ambitions. With a hasty breath, she wiped away the remnants of her self-doubt. Resolving to push through, she settled onto the worn couch, laptop balanced precariously on her knees. Each keystroke felt electric as she typed out her application for the art competition, their grand prize representing a first step into a new identity. As the cursor blinked impatiently, Jessica questioned her intention. Was she doing this for validation, or was she genuinely ready to stretch beyond her comfort zone? Just submit it, Jess, she murmured, her finger hovering over the send button. The chill of self-judgment gripped her, but she thrust the fear aside, feeling adrenaline through her veins. Click. It was done. A rush of nausea intertwined with exhilaration coursed through her. It was both liberating and terrifying. There was no turning back now. Later that evening, the weight of the day settled heavily as children's laughter filled the house. They clustered around her, eager to tell her about their day, their joy igniting her own piquing confidence. Drawing upon the words Mark had shared during their chats, she posed a question: what would you do if you had no limits? Their eyes sparkled with possibilities, unburdened by doubt, leaving Jessica wondering why she hadn't adopted that mindset sooner. Inspired, she pulled out her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. After weeks of idle sketches meant for inspiration, her hand finally felt steady. Lines transformed into shapes, showing a vision unfurling as she lost herself in the strokes of creativity. This is who I am, she thought, realizing in that moment that art wasn't just an escape, it was a revelation. But with creation came the dread of sharing, a fear that gnawed at her. What if they laughed? What if it was never enough? In that moment of vulnerability, another message chimed from Mark. He had been waiting for her to share her latest work. His excitement ignited something within her again, and she sent him a photo of her sketch, her heart racing as she hit send. His response came quickly, an outpouring of encouragement and inspiration. You've finally tapped into it, Jess. This is just the beginning. His belief in her pushed her to confront her own insecurities. Yet, a flicker of doubt remained. What if she didn't live up to the potential he saw? That night, sleep eluded her, but visions of future pieces danced in her mind, intertwining with the potential of her art career and the realization that she had far more to offer than she ever allowed herself to believe. In her insomniac moments, she pondered whether she would continue to rise or retreat into fear once again. As the dawn broke, casting a warm glow over her workspace, Jessica recognized a critical truth: the journey was not simply about painting and recognition. It was about learning to reclaim her narrative, about rebuilding herself piece by piece. But as she gazed out at the day ahead, one question loomed large. Would she seize the opportunity to display her work at the upcoming showcase, or let her past failures define her again? The answer would determine her next move. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the chaotic remnants of breakfast scattered across the kitchen table. Jessica moved through the motions of tidying, an autopilot response muffling the urgency gnawing at her stomach. With each clatter of dishes, she contemplated the decision looming over her. The art showcase deadline loomed within a week, and she could feel her heart race with impending resolve. She forced herself to breathe deeply, focusing on the smallest details. The brick-red mug featuring her favorite quote sat next to her sketchbook, a reminder that inspiration frequently begot action. Yet, self-doubt lurked, shaking hands with the quiet excitement of creative possibility. What if she wasn't ready? What if, despite her preparation, criticism swept through her like a storm? Within moments, her phone lit up, breaking her internal dialogue. A text from Mark, urging her to join an online group of artists. They shared critiques and celebrated progress. You need this support, Jess. You can't do it alone, he wrote, a digital lifeline. She hesitated. Stripping her vulnerability raw before a virtual community seemed daunting. Their ideals of what art should be felt intimidating against her unruly style. Can I really handle the push and pull of opinions, especially those from strangers? She wondered, contemplating the weight of expectations. The what-ifs rattled as she stared at the screen, her fingers itching to respond. Maybe it's time to share my work beyond the confines of my home, she murmured to herself, finally accessing the group link. With a shaking hand, she joined and introduced herself. Instantly, a sense of exhilaration washed over her, but it was swiftly met with a cascade of anxiety. This was a new avenue, a potential gateway to growth, and also a potential source of sharp critique. An unwelcome thought crept back in. What if they reject what I create? As negativity clawed its way in, she reminded herself of the lines that flowed from her hand just days ago, the clarity she felt in each stroke. That essence was worth sharing, worth expressing, even if it faltered through the lens of others. As the day wore on, Jessica's determination hardened. She effectively transformed the remnants of her earlier struggle into productivity. Each minute plotted out her strategy for the art showcase. She made lists of works to display, developed a narrative around her creations, and thought deeply about how to articulate the layers of her pieces to the judges. The conflict between inherent fear and burgeoning confidence created an unusual synergy that precipitated a creative wildfire. Nights turned into mornings as she poured herself into preparation, her living room transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. However, with each new creation, shadows of doubt stalked her closely. When she stumbled upon particularly tough passages in her process, a small voice whispered, "See? You're not cut out for this." But she resolved to respond aloud, "Enough. I am doing this for me, for my children." The fire ignited by her passion increasingly consumed her fears. Her cell phone pinged once again, breaking her focus. A notification indicated a comment on her introduction post. Someone had praised her dedication and suggested setting up a time to collaboratively brainstorm on how to present individually at the showcase. This flicker of connection ignited warmth within her. The realization struck: collaboration could elevate her work instead of diminishing it. That evening, amid a chaotic family ritual of bath time and bedtime stories, she felt a tremor of hope echoing within. "I am not alone in this," she told herself. She could lean on others while still maintaining her unique voice. As she tucked her children into bed, she contemplated the implications of her choices. Was she truly prepared for the showcase? Questions loomed, transitioning from self-doubt to anticipation. The thrill of artistic expression loomed over her consciousness like an electrifying storm. Just as she settled down to put her thoughts into a coherent plan for the upcoming presentation, her phone chimed again. It was Mark checking in, eager to hear how she managed with these new connections. Jessica could feel her pulse quicken. Welcoming another conversation meant digging deeper into her choice and risking more vulnerability. But a surge of exhilaration broke through her hesitation. What if this is the connection that leads to my future, she thought. Their exchange could solidify her resolve and infuse the new ideas whirling in her mind with the courage to expand beyond her place. With newfound vigor, she took a breath and replied, "Let's talk about my plans. There's so much to share." How far could this momentum carry her? The challenge of self-expression loomed, portending both promise and peril. As Jessica embraced the uncertainty, she wondered if this connection could ultimately benefit not just her art, but the very identity she was forging anew. What did it mean to share her truth with the world, and, more importantly, was she ready to confront the reality of her own artistic voice? Jessica leaned back in her chair, her fingers hovering over her phone as anticipation coursed through her body. Would Mark respond quickly, or would he keep her in suspense? This back and forth felt like a dance, one that both intrigued and terrified her. As she waited, anxious thoughts spiraled in her mind, threatening to overshadow the delicate resolve she had meticulously crafted. Focus on the art, she reminded herself, rolling her shoulders back as though shaking off the weight of expectation. The walls of her living room, adorned with half-finished canvases and haphazard sketches, became a sanctuary, vibrant with colors reflecting her inner chaos. She willed herself to silence the deep-seated fears whispering that she was an imposter, that the judgments might validate those fears. The showcase loomed large in her thoughts, a manifestation of everything she had been working toward, yet so fraught with risk. Finally, her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Mark had responded. "I'm really interested to hear your plans. Shall we video chat tomorrow? I can help with structure." A hint of unease pricked at her. Structure? Wasn't art, by its very nature, about breaking from boundaries? But she quickly reminded herself of the compromise she had struck. Collaboration did not have to mean losing her unique voice. Her heart raced as she considered how to navigate this conversation. "All right, let us do it," she texted back, her pulse steadying. Agreeing to a video chat with Mark meant she would have to articulate her vision, share her messy, raw process, and perhaps even expose her insecurities. That evening, in the quiet after putting her children to bed, she prepared for their talk. She jotted down notes, covering everything from the pieces she planned to showcase to her thoughts about how they intertwined her life experiences. The act of writing it down began to transform her fear into clarity. Every word flowed, each reflection igniting more determination within her. As the clock crept closer to their scheduled chat, Jessica felt a surge of conflicting energies. Excitement surged alongside anxiety. In those moments, she confronted her fears head-on. The nerves were reminders of growth, signs that she was pushing beyond her comfort zone. "This isn't just about the art," she whispered to herself. "It's about the journey, the story behind every stroke." The video chat began promptly at 7. Mark appeared on her screen with an encouraging smile. Jessica smiled back, absorbing his enthusiasm. They dove right into her plans, Mark occasionally nudging her with questions that demanded more in-depth answers. "What do you hope people take away from this piece?" he asked. For a moment, she hesitated, flooded with ambiguity. What did she hope for? Did she want validation? A connection? Mixture of exhilaration and trepidation plaguing her thoughts. She stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Her desire for growth was palpable, yet the question echoed louder than any of her accomplishments: could she truly blend collaboration with individuality? The answer seemed just beyond her grasp, tantalizingly close yet suspiciously elusive. Jessica resolved to take the next step and reach out to other members of the online group, to see how their collective experiences could craft a fuller story. But as she considered this next move, a disquieting truth surfaced: even in the throes of collaboration, the journey toward her authenticity was hers alone. What if this next leap uncovered a side of herself she had long buried? The thought thrummed through her. How could shared experiences illuminate her art in ways she hadn't yet imagined? As the dawn light broke through her window, Jessica steeled herself for the challenge ahead. The art showcase might transform her life, but navigating the delicate balance of authenticity and community was the real test. What hidden truths would emerge as she reached out, and more critically, what choices would she make for herself as an artist? Jessica awoke the next morning to sunlight pouring through her window, cast in soft hues of amber and gold. The warmth was invigorating, yet didn't entirely dissolve the chill of uncertainty lingering from the night before. This was to be the day when she would take a step toward that leap she had considered, reaching out to others who shared her newfound ambition and goals. She poured herself a cup of coffee, allowing the steam to swirl around her and momentarily cradling its warmth. The scent provided an anchor as she pondered how to initiate connections with the artists in her online group. What if they didn't resonate with her experiences? What if their stories only served to highlight her inadequacies? These questions danced through her mind, twisting and turning like the delicate brush strokes on her canvases. Yet, there was an undeniable thrill in the challenge ahead. The possibility that new voices could add depth to her art sparked a flame within her. Sitting at her cluttered kitchen table, she made a list of members to contact. Each name brought a flicker of hope that their shared experiences might spark personal revelations, prompting her to embrace aspects of her creative identity she had long neglected. The first message she composed began with a simple introduction, yet it crescendoed into a more significant request for guidance. Jessica knew the importance of articulating her intentions honestly. She typed, "I'd love to get your thoughts on how you balance personal narratives with artistic expression. Would you be open to a conversation?" With her heart pounding, she pressed send. Immediately, self-doubt crept back in what if no one responded? What if her vulnerability was met with silence or indifference? Her finger hovered over her phone again, paralyzed by the anticipation of potential rejection. But Jessica caught herself, reminding herself of the breakthroughs she had achieved thus far. "This is part of the journey," she whispered. Soon after, she received a reply from someone named Sarah, who expressed enthusiasm to chat. The words ignited a sense of relief and excitement. As much as she feared judgment, there was a spark of potential friendship, formed around a shared love for art. They arranged a time to talk, and as the minutes ticked away, Jessica prepared herself mentally. Despite her nervousness, she felt a flicker of readiness. She had so much to learn from Sarah's perspective, and even opening this dialogue felt monumental. When their call began, Sarah radiated energy, introducing herself with an infectious warmth that eased Jessica's lingering tension. They exchanged stories about their artistic journeys, peeling back layers of their personal histories, and before long, Jessica discovered that they both struggled with similar fears: the fear of inadequacy, of judgment, and the desperate pursuit of authentic expression. Their discussion became a cascade of ideas, each one weaving through Jessica's mind, illuminating pathways she had yet to explore. Sarah's insights resounded within her, leading Jessica to confront unaddressed questions about her art and her identity. How much of her work was shaped by outside opinions? How could she redefine her artistic voice in a way that encompasses yet transcends those influences? As days turned into a week, more members responded to her outreach, creating a vibrant web of opportunity for discussion. Each conversation carved out new space within her for reflection and discovery. She challenged herself to acknowledge her fears but also determined to push them aside to create freely. The act of sharing stories and insights rejuvenated her approach to her art. Yet, beneath the excitement, the shadow of doubt loomed ominously. Would she risk exposing too much of herself? Was she ready to stand firmly in her vulnerability, knowing that the opinions of others could be both constructive and critical? The prospect of creating art with raw honesty now felt both exhilarating and daunting. In those moments of quiet self-reflection, deeper questions began to take root. Who was Jessica as an artist, apart from what others might think? How could she innovate while respecting her own narrative? Just as she began to peel back the layers of self-imposed constraints, she felt a surge of determination to forge a new path. Suddenly, a notification jolted her from her thoughts. It was a message from Mark, asking if she was ready for a follow-up meeting to discuss her showcase ideas. His inquiry evoked mixed feelings: anticipation tinged with anxiety. Was she prepared to further dissect her vision with someone who might challenge her perspective yet might be an integral part of her journey? Jessica inhaled deeply, knowing the time had come. She was on the brink of a significant decision, poised to face Mark again, this time armed with not only more knowledge but also a deeper understanding of her very own artistic journey. The moment was approaching, and the stakes felt impossibly high. What revelations awaited her in this next conversation? Would she cling to her newfound insights, or would curiosity lead her down paths surprising and challenging? Jessica took a deep breath as the clock approached the hour for her meeting with Mark. The room felt charged, vibrant with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. She had spent the last week engaging in dialogues, filling her mind with renewed perspectives and insights. Today, she would need to express these ideas clearly and persuasively, something that both excited and terrified her. Before the call, she glanced at her notes, a messy collection of thoughts and reflections encapsulating her journey thus far. The pages were filled with questions surrounding her vision, her identity, and how best to present her work. Each line represented her evolving mindset about art as a conduit for personal expression, not merely a response to external expectations. The video call flickered to life, revealing Mark seated in a sleek studio. He greeted her with an encouraging smile, yet his relaxed demeanor only amplified her internal jitteriness. He began the conversation by asking Jessica about her progress since their last discussion. His tone was direct but supportive. She had always appreciated that balance in him. "I've been exploring how I can express my own narrative more authentically," she started, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've talked to a few fellow artists about blending personal experiences with artistic expression, and it really opened my eyes to what's possible." Mark leaned forward, visibly intrigued. "That's great to hear. But how do you plan to implement that into your showcase concept?" The question struck Jessica like a lightning bolt, snapping her focus back to the matter at hand. Here was Mark, wanting details, expecting, perhaps even challenging her to deliver. She had anticipated discussing her ideas, but the idea of scrutiny amplified her anxiety. Still, she prepared to dive deep. "I want my showcase to reflect the growth process, how the struggle with self-doubt can shape our artistry. It's not just about showcasing pieces, it's about the journey behind each stroke, each color choice. But I'm also scared that these themes can feel too personal. What if they don't resonate with the audience?" Mark nodded thoughtfully. "Vulnerability can be a double-edged sword, Jessica. There's beauty in sharing your truth, but it's important to find that balance between authenticity and accessibility." His words were a stark reminder of the reality she faced. How much of herself could she reveal without feeling exposed? But rather than retreat into her worries, she felt a surge of defiance. She wanted to transform that vulnerability into strength. "I think that's the point," Jessica replied, her tone gaining fierceness. "The rawness of the truth is what connects us. All of us feel inadequacy at some point. I want to bridge that gap through my art." Mark gave an appreciative nod, his expression shifting into something more pensive. "That's a compelling take. But how do you transform those feelings into a cohesive narrative? You may attract a wider range of reactions if you're too abstract." The intensity of the conversation fueled Jessica's determination. She leaned forward, energized by this intellectual exchange. "Perhaps I can create both relatable and personal pieces, juxtaposing my own experiences while allowing room for viewers to project their own narratives onto them." As they continued discussing various strategies to achieve this, ideas flowed between them like an electric current. Mark pushed her to think critically about her process, her branding, her audience, and her ambitions, each question prompting Jessica to articulate facets of her vision that had only existed in vague sketches until now. By the end of the call, she felt lighter, as if a veiled weight had been lifted. She had successfully navigated through fear, refining her artistic identity in the process. Still, an undercurrent of anxiety remained, a reminder of the risks involved in exposing her vulnerabilities to the world. "What about the final presentation?" Mark asked as they wrapped up. "Are you ready to face that audience and share your innermost thoughts?" A knot formed in Jessica's stomach at the thought of stepping into the emotional spotlight, but she also sensed an exhilarating thrill, the potential to transform not only her own experiences into art but also to inspire others. She had unearthed a personal truth: the forthcoming presentation needed to reflect who she truly was as both an individual and an artist. With a brisk nod, she replied, "I think I am. I'm ready to face them, to embrace that part of myself." As the call ended and Mark signed off, Jessica looked out her window, the sunlight illuminating the room like newfound possibilities. Despite the lingering uncertainty, a profound realization washed over her. Confronting her fears wasn't merely about building her art, it was about redefining who she was and discovering her power through vulnerability. And as another wave of self-reflection struck her, one question lingered in her mind: what would it take for her to fully embrace this path, both in her art and in her life? Would she emerge stronger as she prepared for the showcase, or would her insecurities still threaten to overshadow her voice? Determined, she picked up her notebook, ready to map out her next steps. Little did she know, the path ahead was about to take a sudden, unexpected turn, challenging everything she thought she understood about herself. Jessica couldn't shake the excitement churning within her, but as she sat at her desk, the weight of her uncertainties loomed larger than ever. How could she transform the myriad of thoughts swirling in her mind into something tangible and impactful? She opened her notebook, the chaotic penmanship unspooling memories and fears alike. Each word she scribbled was a plea for clarity, a desperate attempt to wrest control over her own narrative. She began by sketching out the themes she wanted to explore: the balance of vulnerability with relatability, the contrast between personal experiences and collective emotional truths. But with every stroke of the pen, doubts crept in, tarnishing her initial fervor. Would her personal struggles alienate the audience instead of drawing them in? This question gnawed at her, driving her almost to the point of abandoning the project that had already begun to define her artistic vision. No, she whispered fiercely to herself. She couldn't afford to let fear dictate her path. Instead, she focused on the core of her fears: inadequacy. This was the same feeling that had plagued her during her previous art showcases, the same feeling that had nearly silenced her voice. With newfound resolve, she flipped the page and began writing again, this time deliberately confronting what made her feel small. "I have to own my narrative," she wrote. "Every story of struggle is also a story of resilience. The audience deserves that honesty." As the words flowed, she could almost feel a shift deep within her, an awakening of sorts. She wasn't merely presenting pieces of art, she was laying bare her soul, inviting others to witness the messy yet beautiful journey of self-discovery. And as she embraced this truth, she realized her previous anxiety was rooted not in vulnerability, but in the fear of being unseen. The next day, a sense of determination washed over Jessica as she prepared for her meeting with Mark. She needed to articulate her evolving ideas and ensure he understood the depth of her vision. Stepping into the studio once more, she felt different, more grounded, ready to voice the complexities of her artistic journey. "Last time we spoke, I was hesitant about the level of vulnerability I wanted to include," she began as they settled into their discussion. "But I've re-examined that. My experiences, my struggles define my art. I want to reflect that in the showcase." Mark studied her closely, a small spark of approval igniting his expression. "That's a significant shift, Jessica. How do you plan to illustrate these emotional landscapes?" "The showcase will be a reflection of different phases of my journey," she explained, the words tumbling out with increased confidence. "I want to create pieces that connect on an emotional level, allowing the audience to engage with the art while seeing themselves in it. The narratives don't solely belong to me, they're relatable human experiences." Mark nodded approvingly, challenging her further. "Can you think of a specific piece that embodies this concept?" Jessica's mind raced, enthusiasm igniting fresh ideas. "Yes. I'm considering creating a large canvas that represents the turbulence of self-doubt, fractured colors and distorted shapes that represent confusion. But opposed to that chaotic centerpiece, I'd juxtapose a piece filled with vibrant hues, capturing moments of clarity and strength. Streams of color intertwining would signify how we navigate through those chaotic phases." Mark sat back, absorbing her vision. "That's powerful. It sounds like you're finally leaning into that complexity rather than shying away from it." For the first time in weeks, Jessica felt a sense of liberation. The tension she often associated with sharing her thoughts dissipated, replaced by clarity and purpose. This conversation forged a pivotal moment in her artistic journey, where her previous fears transformed into an empowering meditation on growth and change. As they wrapped up the meeting and she created her action plan based on their discussion, Jessica felt buoyed by her own evolving identity. Yet, doubt still flickered at the edges of her mind. Could she truly connect with the audience? Would her message resonate or fall flat? The deeper she ventured into her narrative, the more she realized that connection would stem from raw honesty, not perfection. She embraced challenges as a necessary part of creation, but as the excitement bounded within her, it came with a terrifying prospect. The final presentation was looming, a date fixed upon the horizon that both thrilled and terrified her. The moment when her thoughts and fears would be laid bare before an audience felt both exhilarating and daunting. Jessica took a deep breath and looked out her window once more. Sunlight flooded the room, gilding her resolve with warmth and possibility. Jessica awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window, the morning sun filtering through the curtains, casting light across her once chaotic bedroom. Her heart raced, not just from the excitement of her impending showcase, but from a sense of duty to transform her artistic vision into reality. As she rose from her bed, she took a moment to breathe in the stillness of the morning, grounding herself before the day unfolded. She grabbed her coffee and sat quietly at her desk, its surface cluttered with sketches and ideas. The chaos felt familiar yet invigorating, a reflection of the emotional landscapes she intended to portray. Today, she would delve into the abstract chaos of self-doubt and the vibrant colors of clarity. She envisioned the dichotomy postures of despondency intertwined with eruptions of joy. Each brushstroke would represent a piece of her soul, encapsulated in canvas. An idea flickered in her mind, challenging her to extend her narrative into a more profound realm. What if she didn't just share her individual experiences, but invited a glimpse of the collective consciousness around vulnerability? She needed to grapple with her anxieties head-on while creating a community ethos within her art. She reached for her notebook, the same one where she had wrestled with her fears, and began jotting down thoughts for her new concept. "Dare to share," she wrote carefully. "Art is a shared experience, an unguarded conversation between souls." The note sparked a rush of inspiration. If she could present her vulnerabilities, revealing the raw edges of her existence, surely others would resonate with that vulnerability. Could her art serve as a bridge between her fears and the audience's interpretation, uniting them in shared humanity? As the day progressed, she felt a deep-seated bravery unfurling inside her. Bolstered by her new vision, she called Mark to discuss a possible expansion of her showcase. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steadier than it had ever been, "about incorporating interactive elements. I want my audience to be part of the experience, not just passive viewers. We could allow them to contribute to the artwork, to share their stories." Mark was silent for a moment before responding, "That's intriguing, Jessica. An interactive component could deepen the emotional impact tremendously. How do you envision this working?" Jessica's mind flashed with images of vibrant spaces, people engaging with her pieces in real time, perhaps leaving their own marks or textures on the canvas. "I want to create a space where they feel emboldened to express their own stories of struggle and resilience. These could be layered onto the work, pieces of their personal journeys interwoven with mine." "Brilliant," Mark enthused. "But consider how you'll facilitate that, what will guide them through the process?" The question stung, igniting a fresh wave of self-doubt that lurked within her. Could she orchestrate such an endeavor? What if her attempts failed to resonate or even hindered the connection she hoped to cultivate? Yet this was also an opportunity for growth. If she had the courage to share her journey, perhaps she possessed the strength to inspire others to do the same. After their conversation, Jessica sat back, the weight of impending decisions pressing upon her shoulders. She understood now that every risk carried with it the possibility of setback, but also immense potential. In the quiet moments of reflection, she realized that her journey was not just about confronting fears, it was about forging connections, those unexpected friendships found in art and vulnerability. With determination ignited, Jessica pledged to take decisive action. Having laid the groundwork for her expanding vision, she envisioned an interactive display that invited vulnerability into every corner. The canvas was no longer a solitary expression of her inner turmoil, but a tapestry woven from the experiences of many. As the days drew closer to the presentation, a nagging fear resurfaced, whispering to her with cold conviction, what if the attempt failed? What if the audience felt alienated rather than engaged? Yet, she pushed back, standing resolutely in her truth. The integrity of her art would shine not only through her individual experiences but through the collective tapestry they could create together. It struck her this showcase had become about more than her narrative. It was a call to the audience, a moment to rewrite their own stories in collaboration. As her heart raced with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, she returned to her sketches, each stroke a declaration of her resolve. She was ready to confront this new challenge head-on, but deep down her thoughts churned. Would confronting her fears and daring to invite others into her emotional world instead leave her more exposed than ever? All at once, she felt the thrill of possibility and the chill of vulnerability clash within her. And with that internal conflict simmering, Jessica prepared herself for the journey ahead. The showcase was just around the corner, and so was the uncertainty of how her audience might respond to the rawness of her work. Would she emerge with a renewed sense of self, or would her emotional exposure backfire, leaving her more isolated than before? The moment of truth loomed closer, a tantalizing call to embrace both awe and terror. There was no time for dwelling on what could go wrong. As the sun dipped into the evening sky, painting the room in a golden hue, Jessica felt an almost electrifying energy coursing through her veins. She had committed to this new approach, to open herself up in a way that she had never considered before. Knots of anxiety twisted in her stomach, battling against an intoxicating sense of purpose. Her evening ritual now included reviewing each interactive element of her concept. The images in her mind formed a vibrant collage: a wall for anonymous confessions, blank canvases jutting out invitingly, and buckets of colored paint that glistened, waiting for participation. This was no longer merely her showcase, it had transformed into an experience. A whole gallery where dialogues of vulnerability could unfold. Yet late into the night, as shadows danced across the walls, her confidence faltered. Was it genuine bravery that propelled her forward, or reckless ambition? Recollections of previous exhibits flickered through her thoughts, where art felt static, cut off from any real dialogue. Perhaps she kept a tight grip on her work out of fear that if she let go, the very fabric of her world could unravel. Jessica paced, her fingers brushing across familiar sketches that had served as her companions in solitude. In the absence of connection to the outside world, she had always drawn strength from these representations of personal despair and triumph. Each piece reflected fragments of her struggles, and she felt oddly defensive, bracing herself against any onlookers who might misinterpret her journey. Could these outsiders really handle the rawness she was about to unfold? She grabbed her notebook again, the faint remnants of the day's thoughts spilling onto the page. What if their stories clash with mine, she wrote. What if they expose my flaws instead of celebrating our shared humanity? The familiar buzz of doubt hummed in the back of her mind, urging her to reconsider the interaction she was poised to invite. But with each word, she recognized a growing defiance against that doubt. The tension pushed her to make a crucial decision, to reach out to a fellow artist, Elena, known for her bold installations that often sparked intense discussions. Elena had a knack for guiding audiences through their own interpretations without overshadowing the intent of her work. Jessica fired off a text, inviting her over to brainstorm ideas that would ensure the interactive aspect was respectful, yet engaging. Sure, I'd love to, Elena replied almost instantly. When can we meet? Jessica felt a rush of relief mixed with apprehension. Collaborating with someone experienced in fostering dialogue was a game-changer. She needed both insight and the courage to accept guidance. Tomorrow, they would sit down together, two creatives navigating the fragile line between personal expression and shared experience. That thought brought a flicker of excitement, yet it was marred by an underlying concern. There were no guarantees that an artist of Elena's caliber would connect with her ideas. What if they clashed? Would her voice get lost in the discourse? This possibility punctuated her confidence with the probing question of authenticity. Who would dictate the narrative, the artist or the audience? The remnants of her self-doubt loomed large, but Jessica steeled herself. A flare of rebellion ignited within her as she embraced the principle and the risk that she would not let self-doubt dictate her direction. It was time to explore uncharted territories. She needed to foster a space that allowed her to not just coexist with her vulnerabilities but to thrive because of them. As Jessica prepared her notes for the meeting, she felt keenly aware that this path would require forging ahead through uncertainty, iterating her own vision while allowing space for collaboration. The more she focused on these interconnected layers of art and community, the more resolute her sense of self became. But her pulse quickened again at the thought. Was she ready to relinquish some creative control? To potentially expose her truths to another and invite a flow that had yet to be defined? The time was drawing near, and with it, the culmination of her thoughts, fears, and aspirations. A daunting prospect loomed on the horizon. She would have to lay bare both her art and her heart in a way that might leave her forever changed. And as she put her pencil down, a realization struck her: the moment of transformation hovered just beyond the curtain. Could she truly embrace the shared stories not just as a facilitator, but as a participant in this evolving display of connection? That single question lingered, leaving her anxiously wondering if she was prepared to meet herself in the process. When the day of the showcase finally arrived, Jessica stood before a sea of colors and canvases, each one a manifestation of her journey. The gallery hummed with energy as people mingled, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken narratives. She had spent countless nights bravely pouring herself into her works, but now came the ultimate challenge, inviting others to share in her vulnerability, to weave their own stories into the fabric of her artistic tapestry. Moments before the doors opened, she took a deep breath, grounding herself amidst the chaos. Her heart raced in tandem with the ticking clock. This was not just a presentation of art, it was an invitation for connection, an opportunity for audiences to engage with the layered narratives that had once felt so isolating. The first guests began to arrive, and Jessica felt a surge of adrenaline. As they stepped inside, their gazes scanned the walls filled with her pieces, each one reflecting the tumultuous balance of disorder and clarity she had experienced throughout her life. She stood silently, a witness to their reactions, allowing the art to speak for itself. Then, with a nod of encouragement from Mark, who lingered supportively at the entrance, she approached the front of the gallery. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Today is about more than showcasing my work. It's about sharing our stories, connecting over our struggles, and embracing our vulnerabilities. I invite you to interact with the art and contribute your own experiences." The room responded with murmurs of curiosity. Jessica moved toward the canvas illustrating her turbulence of self-doubt. Its jagged lines and muted hues seemed alive. She felt a swell of pride in the creative chaos she had embraced, recognizing that her once inhibiting fears had transformed into bold strokes of personal insight. As people approached, she watched them curiously, their fingers hovering over brushes and paints. Jessica encouraged them to leave their marks. Brushes dipped in vibrant colors flowed effortlessly now, mingling with her own. The process was transformative, not only for them but for her. With every swirl and splash that added to the canvas, she felt the weight of isolation lift. Engaging in conversation with a woman who hesitated with oil paint at the edge of her brush ignited something undeniable. "I struggle with sharing my feelings, fearing they'll be dismissed," the woman confessed, her eyes reflecting Jessica's earlier insecurities. It was a moment of brilliance, the kind of connection she had always wished for, a recognition of shared humanity in vulnerability. Jessica thought back to that initial moment when she had felt so alone, the fear of judgment so palpable. Now, here was evidence of growth, of courage forged in the fires of doubt. Clarity resonated within her. Her art was not merely for herself, but rather a conduit for others to join in a collective experience. By the end of the evening, the gallery walls had transformed, not just from the splashes of paint but from something deeper, an exploration of emotional landscapes that connected strangers through mutual understanding. With each color added, Jessica had relinquished control, allowing her narrative to interweave with others, uniting their stories into a greater tapestry of shared experience. As the event wound down, she moved through the space, recounting snippets of conversations, each one resonating with authenticity. People expressed gratitude, some with tears in their eyes as they recounted their own struggles, thanking her for providing the space to connect through art. In these moments, she discovered something she hadn't anticipated, a solid confidence that blossomed from this intimate exchange. When the evening officially came to a close, Jessica stepped out into the cool night air. Freedom washed over her, an exhilarating fulfillment that came from not only conquering her fears but also nurturing her identity as an artist. The doubts that had once loomed so large now felt like distant echoes. The transformation she experienced was palpable, a shift from merely creating for validation to creating as a bridge that invited others to share their journeys. For the first time, Jessica felt the weight of her past lift as she emerged into a brighter future, one bursting with promise and authenticity. A concluding realization crystallized within her: she had proven to herself that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but rather an invitation for connection. With pride bursting from within, she recognized that while the showcase was the culmination of her hard work, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could embrace her narrative and inspire others to do the same. As she walked away, a confident stride replaced the uncertainty that once plagued her. The last vestiges of doubt about her worth had been dismantled, replaced by a sturdy foundation of self-acceptance and recognition. It was clear now, she belonged both in her own skin and in this artistic arena, ready to explore new horizons while continuing to push through the challenges. Jessica had not only achieved her goal, but she had established herself in the world exactly as she was: an artist, a mother, and, most importantly, a woman unafraid to face her truth. Now, it is your turn. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, your support is crucial. Comment below your reactions and theories about this ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share, your real friends deserve this transformative inspiration.